Um, First of all, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming. We're happy to be hosting this this fireside chat webinar to introduce the bootcamp experience and also hopefully share a bit of an experience of the bootcamp, of what it might be like to be here. I'm Carl Bachellieri. I'm one of the coaches at Reboot and will be one of the facilitators at the bootcamp in November. And I'm going to be serving as moderator today. And I'm here with Crystal Bell, who's another of our coaches and will be also a facilitator, and Jerry Colonna, who you may be familiar with. So I want to give you a little bit of a orientation before we get started and a little bit of a sense of our time together. We're going to spend some time, I'm going to ask some opening questions and have Jerry and Crystal share more about the bootcamp and give you a sense of what to expect, and maybe some of the background and sort of the thinking in terms of what we're hoping to create as an experience for everybody during that bootcamp. And then we're going to open it up for some inquiry on your parts too. We're going to give some open time, ask you some questions, give a little bit of time for reflection. And then we're going to open it up into more of a conversational space, and answer questions or share a conversation. So to get started, I wanted to read a poem that by Bell Hooks that I think really sets this this whole bootcamp powerfully. It may very well be something that we read on day one. When angels speak of love. When angels speak of love, they tell us all is union and reunion, dying, reborn again. There is no separation, no end to paradise. We are always present, the ecstatic moving us along each current, each wilderness of spirit, a dedicated path. Bell Hooks. Jerry, I wanted to begin by sort of leaning into a conversation with you. I know you chose that poem intentionally for your latest book. Your latest book, titled Reunion, has a lot to do with this bootcamp. It's not the entirety of the theme of the bootcamp, but wow, it's a strong current. And it feels like a different kind of a bootcamp as a result. So I wonder if you might share a little bit about how is this bootcamp different from bootcamps that have been. Maybe you'll share a little bit about what bootcamps have been and share with folks a little bit of what we're starting to wade into together.
Sure. First of all, welcome everybody. I see a bunch of friends, even if you've got your cameras off. So it really makes me smile to see those smiling faces or just the names. So thank you for coming. Yeah. So first of all, a word about that poem. Bell Hooks, it's hard to describe her contributions as a feminist, as a scholar, as a provocateur, and as a poet. Bell Hooks, for years, inspired me. And while I was in the middle of writing Reunion, she passed. And some may know, most folks probably don't, that she and my teacher, Sharon Salzberg, were very close friends. And so by the transitive property of all things algebraic, I felt close to Bell Hooks, because I am very close to Sharon. And as you know, whenever someone passes, their works start flying around the internet. And so, of course, I started stumbling through and I came across this poem, which is from the book When Angels Speak of Love, which is the first line of that poem. And then I understood at that moment that I was on to something, because those of you who may have read the book know that what I was seeking to do in that book what I'm seeking to do in my work now is to really answer the question of what is our responsibility in a world that is so divided, so challenged. As I said, I think I even said to you, Angela, so challenging that a baby might be murdered for ideology or for hate. What is our responsibility in a world like this? So back to Carl's question, because by the way, you're going to have to keep bringing me back because I just can't.
Okay.
When we first launched the boot camp 10, 11 years ago, boot camps actually predate Reboot. And so much of what you may know as Reboot, the company, stems from our coming together to challenge ourselves, to create a container where people can do the work that they need to do to become the adults they were born to be. You know, esoterically, that's how I would describe boot camp. And we'll get Crystal to speak about the experience of boot camp, because Crystal was before she was a coach with us at Reboot, she was a participant in the boot camp. And anyway, when we started that process, we sort of unleashed something that we really had no idea what it was going to do. It became very quickly became this place in which people would come and do their work in community, but do their own work together with like-minded spirits. And it was out of that experience that I wrote my first book, Reboot. It was out of that experience and the experience of coaching that I came to understand something that we are very well known for saying, which is that better humans make better leaders. And that our process really is about coming to become a better human. So how does this connect back to what we're trying to do now? As I wrote in Reunion, it is true that better humans make better leaders. It is true that we all have to do this work of unpacking and knowing what are the limiting beliefs that hold us back from living the life that we were really born to live. But the effort to move towards being a better human that stops at the meat sack of me and does not consider the experience of people outside of me feels insufficient. It feels like it falls short, especially in times like these. And so when we started considering the possibility of a 10th anniversary boot camp, what I was really particularly interested in, what we were particularly interested in, was building on the truth of what we've been doing for 10 years and pushing the envelope even further so that we could sort of live up to that really profound exhortation that better humans make better leaders. And if you don't stop me, I'll just keep going.
No, that's great, Jerry. There's a line in, and we were talking about this just before. There's a quote inside of the book that stood out to me and struck me as I think maybe really relevant for our conversation, because it starts to lean into, okay, so then now what? Like, what does it look like to take that sentiment and then understanding and apply it to our leadership, and what might the experience at a boot camp of leaning into that look like? And this was, I think it's on page 129, says, what's needed for true reunion and therefore lasting transformation are visceral somatic experiences coupled with repetition. Reverie, active imagination, art, all of these drop people into their bodies and into their hearts. And then the energy that's stirred up becomes the fuel for transformation and connection and reunion. And that that itself being part of a larger conversation about lasting change and countering othering. And I I I wonder if that's a way to, and I open this up to Crystal and to you, Jerry, to talk a little bit about what's it like to walk into a boot camp? What kind of experiences do folks tend to have? What lets you know that you've entered another world when you walk into a boot camp?
Um, I'll share a memory first, and then I'd love to hear Crystal's response on that. And Margaret has joined us, and Margaret is also part of the Reboot family and has helped create boot camps now for 7, 8 years. So she'll recognize this line. When we first described and defined boot camps, what we wanted to do was go beyond a kind of traditional leadership retreat. We wanted to go really beyond anything that I had experienced before. And I remember the very first night of the very first boot camp, and we had this exercise that I literally thought of on the spot just before we got started. And we had printed out answers to a question such as what is it that you're struggling with right now? And we anonymized those and we passed them out. And people were sitting in a circle and they started reading aloud these responses. And about midway through, a fellow named Matt, I won't give you his last name, puts his hand on his chest and says, "Is anybody else having a panic attack? I'm having a panic attack right now." Because what had happened, and we've seen this repeated, what had happened was distinction between my struggles and your struggles started to fall away. And people started to no longer be able, they lost sight of what was it that I wrote, because everything I heard sounded as if something I could have written. And I remember that moment. That was the first time, Margaret, you've heard me say this. That was the first time I turned to the group and I said, "Welcome to boot camp," in that very Jerry way, because it was not designed to give you just a practical set of tools that you could walk away and say, "Okay, I have a certificate." It was designed to give you an experience that called forth something different inside of you. Crystal, what was your first boot camp like?
Gosh, so let's see, fall of 2018. And Carl, you asked this question how do you know you've arrived, and what's that experience like? And I'll say that when I got the invitation, Jerry, you didn't say anything about what was going to happen there.
Mhm.
And you said just come. We'll happy to have you, and just arrive. You're ready. And I kind of knew not to ask too many questions about what would happen, because I had a sense that I don't know, magic or something would happen, something would unfold when I got there, and throughout the course of the experience. So there I was, and I showed up in Colorado to this beautiful place, and I walked in, and I had just such a clear sense that this was really, really different, that I was walking into something that it's so funny that, one of the themes around reunion is also belonging. I wasn't entirely sure, ooh, am I going to feel like I belong here? Am I going to feel like I'm part of this group? And it was like immediately I felt like I was walking into something that was going to hold me for the next 5 days. And there was just such a felt sense that I had of something really, really different. Also this experience of things happening on at least 2 different threads, maybe more, but the ones I'll name are, there's something that's happening for me individually, like I'm having this individual experience, but I'm also having an amazing shared experience with other folks who are going through the same thing. Yeah, so that's how I knew that I was in a place that I had rarely been before with other humans. Um, and certainly a place that I had rarely been professional. You know, these were all leaders that I was working with and or who were attending. It's just not a space that I had been used to operating in. And so I could feel it when I got there. I could feel it when I arrived. Yeah, when we first got to dinner, it's like, hey, you'll land here and then we're all going to meet for dinner. And just walking into that space, that's when I knew that that I was in a place that was really special. And it held throughout those 5 days. Yeah, that's how I'd answer that.
Can I follow up with a question on that, Carl? Crystal, and what was it that you were doing for a living when you joined?
Mhm.
Oh boy. So I what I was doing for a living is I was working in forensics, and I was working for the Oregon State Police Forensics Division, and I was a leader near the top of the organization, ensuring quality for all of the forensic work. And I was there for 20 years. Yeah, 20 years of forensics. And so the other piece of that, and maybe perhaps the other part about why that's important, is I knew Reboot to be a place for CEOs and founders, and I wasn't sure, like, what is my place here? Am I in the right place? Am I going to feel like I belong? Jerry, are you sure that I should be here? Did you make some mistake? And I'll also say that was part of the magic, like this tapestry and patchwork of all of us coming together, regardless of what I was doing in that moment. You know, there's something about readiness. There's something about being open to the experience. And I realized that, like, even though I walked into this space, that I really actually did belong there. Oh, that's what I was doing at the time. Very different than so many of the clients that I work with now. But yeah.
I love asking Crystal that question because I get to use my favorite line. She was my favorite crime fighter because I just think she's so cool.
Thank you.
And now, Crystal, what do you do?
Well, now I am a reboot coach. Yeah. So yeah, a bit of a trajectory and a journey. After boot camp, less than a year later, I stepped into a director role, and I was a director of forensics for the state of Oregon. Boot camp helped me do that. I couldn't see myself stepping into a role that big, and so much of what I learned through my boot camp experience really prepared me to step into a bigger role. You know, ultimately, I've landed as a reboot coach, which I really love. So yeah, quite a journey that boot camp was a catalyst for sure.
Yeah. I wonder, this is such a powerful way to sort of walk into the boot camp experiences to get a sense of a lot of the facilitators. And I want to share that something maybe about myself in this context. It's funny to be both a facilitator and a moderator, so I'm sort of swapping hats, but it feels like relevant to share that when I think of the reunion work and what it looks like for that to move into boot camp, and Jerry, obviously we'll move into this more extensively, but this sense of moving from the radical self-inquiry that's part of the reboot formula. If you haven't heard this before, it's this sense of like, what is this work that we do? It's this radical self-inquiry plus the practical skills and tools that we need to lead our organizations, plus the shared experience of actually meaning making together. And when you were speaking, Jerry, I was thinking of that phrase that we use sometimes in the circle peer coaching groups that we lead, but it's individual work that we can't do alone. that like it's a container for that kind of work. That I was a fan of the boot camp when I was running a clinical program and when I was a therapist, becoming a coach in the day. And what I always understood about boot camps and was looking forward to someday joining one. My first boot camp that I joined as a facilitator a few years back. But that sense of what I saw there in the boot camp was the way that this radical self-inquiry, even though it's an individualized self-inquiry, it becomes part of that magic of what's happening in the room and how it's not so much a download from what any of the facilitators have to teach as it is a facilitated container for how to begin to do that work. Maybe like learn practical skills along like in conversation with each other, but being inside of that container that that I found so sort of compelling about this work. And I guess I share all that to say that I'm sort of placing myself in the position of you all in the audience and listening to us talk about this kind of special space in which the work can be done, and wondering and can imagine, oh, you might have questions about, well, what is it? So I'm thinking about inviting y'all to answer some questions, and I might ask Jerry to speak a little bit to give these questions more context. But I want to invite you all into some of your own individual work by spending some minutes answering these questions, and thereby bringing us all together into this container that we're talking about, and can start to explore, not just talking about boot camp. I sometimes say to my clients, about is an old English word that means near but not in. So we could begin to transition from talking about boot camp and moving into an experience together. I wonder, Jared, if you want to speak more about some of give a little bit more context to what we're about to invite the folks into.
So one of the things that I discovered as I set about writing Reunion and going through my own reunion process, right, to take a step back and provide more context, as I sought to answer this question, what is our responsibility? Forget even the word leader for a moment, because it can be so loaded. What is our responsibility in a world that is so divided, in a world where the longing to belong is so unanswered, desperately unanswered? And I put myself through a reunion process. You know, as I've shared with others in other contexts, Reboot, which some of you may have read, was a very difficult book for me to write because it made me revisit things that had happened to me in the past. Reunion was a much more difficult book for me to write because I was implementing a process for myself. And part of that process I came to understand was that both in my lineage of ancestors, but also in my own experience, there were whole parts of both the historical aspect of my family and the communities in which they belonged, as well as parts of me that were dismembered, disconnected. A great way to imagine what I'm talking about is the Disney movie Encanto. Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote this incredible song, We Don't Talk About Bruno. And those of you who know the film, it's a story of a family and their ancestors and ghosts, and it's a gorgeous story. But there's one member of the family who actually lives in the walls. And we don't talk about Bruno. And that Bruno may have been someone who identified differently than the rest of the family. That Bruno may have been someone whose heteronormative structures of identity just didn't fit And so he lives in the walls. And as I went through my own reunion process, I had to reconnect with the parts of my family, the parts of my own experience that, like Bruno, we didn't talk about. As one of our colleagues, Virginia Bauman, who wrote one of the essays in Reunion, said she spoke about how much her family revered their family tree. And yet she wondered, what happened to the queer ancestors? So we don't talk about them. We don't identify them. So these are some questions that appear at the end of part 1 of Reunion. And I'm going to invite us to maybe do a little journaling, Carl, on these questions.
Yeah, I love that. And like, as though we were in one of our pre-question circles, I'll set a timer, and so that you all have a solid 3 minutes to answer. It's just enough time to get a proper start.
I've got a lot of questions here. They're not going to be. No, I won't read them all then. What do I allow myself to remember? What do I allow myself to remember? What was safer to have forgotten? What was safer to have forgotten? How does it serve me, my family, my organization to have forgotten aspects of our origin? I'll say it again. How does it serve me, my family, my organization to have forgotten aspects of our origin? And lastly, what parts of me may have been disowned by choosing not to remember? What parts of me may have been disowned by choosing not to remember?
So I'll set a timer for 3 minutes, and just take your time to answer those in your own words. About that way. Okay, 10 more seconds until pencil's down. And as we start to gather back into conversation again, I wanted to ask you about your journey. I feel like the piece that you wrote in the reunion book, in a way, was leaning into these questions, and I'd love to hear your journey of writing that.
Yeah, thanks. Such a good question. And Jerry, you spoke a little bit about what the experience was like for you. And mine was very similar. So Jerry asked me if I would read the book as he was writing it. So I was getting snippets. And then he invited me to write something on the theme of belonging for the afterword of the book. And I think the assignment was like, write something about belonging, whatever it is. It was so open-ended, which was great. And, I knew that the assignment was not write something academic on belonging where you'll go and do research and then spit that out. It was very, very personal. And it took me on an entire journey, which was actually, now that I reflect on it, the journey of writing that piece mirrored my journey of boot camp, actually. And so I'll say something about writing, but know that it also that there are also elements of that experience that I also felt in boot camp. And so writing it was really about exploring my own relationship with belonging. And in order to explore the relationship, I had to go back. I had to get really historical. I had to dive back into childhood. I had to dive back into experiences that I've had. It involved my identity, certainly my identity as a queer Black woman, as a mother, as whoever I am to whoever I am to myself. Even exploring my own rapport with myself, because I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I could write this piece without really, really going inward. And so there were elements of exploring my identity. There was something that was very like stripped down, like let me get down to, on the cellular level about what this feels like. And there was something about accepting the invitation. Jerry asked, and I had to say yes, in the same way that Jerry asked me if I would come to the boot camp. It was a choice. It was a choice point where I had to say like yes, and make sure it was like a full embodied yes, so that I could show up in the way that I wanted. And that was the spirit was very similar when I was writing this piece. And then after saying yes, like crossing the threshold of what it really means to do the work, to write something that is uniquely from me, and explore that relationship and be able to put it into words, and then to really, really dive in. And I actually remember, there was a deadline, like with any writing that you do, there's a deadline. Carl, I was in New Mexico, and I got this wonderful little, Airbnb, and I was there to see Carl just for your wedding. And I remember getting this place and staying an extra couple of days. And the place that I stayed was like right on this beautiful piece of land where there were hiking trails. And I knew that part of my writing experience was also would also involve nature. And that's an element that we bring into the boot camps as well. And like, what do I need to do to get quiet enough so that I can really feel that relationship with this topic of belonging? And what are the relationships that I need to look at? What are my high and low moments? And so really, really being able to slow down and get really quiet and bring the hidden stuff out into the open was really part of the process. I actually found, now that I reflect on it, boot camp was very similar in those ways. And I'll say that what came out was messy and tangled and emotional. And I just want to shout out Justin, who is on this call right now, because Justin actually really helped me sort through and sort through the piece that I submitted, and really helped me make sense. Thanks for the love, and thank you so much for doing that. And so yeah, and like there was something vulnerable about writing about this relationship, and also putting it out to someone to read it knowing that it was messy, in the same way that we invite people to bring the messiness of their lives or whatever it is at boot camp, so you can actually work with it, and having the support of others to help untangle it. And so yeah, that's what the experience of writing this was. And also I'll say that anytime you write something that's going to be published, like I was writing this a couple of years ago. It existed in that moment. And there are absolutely pieces that still exist now because it's authentic and it's of me, and it includes so much of my life and that relationship with belonging. But there are also elements that might be different now. And so like the fear of putting something in print and then being like, wait, but I changed. So yeah, anyway, that's what I'll say about that process. But yeah, it was emotional and wonderful and messy and beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm grateful for having been asked.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think a little bit about Margaret and I were talking this before about live streaming or just recording this conversation, and that one of the benefits of recording for sort of releasing it later is that folks have a little bit of a choice of like, oh, the thing that I share, if it's messy and if it's unplanned and things come forward and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure, we can always edit it out. That's the at your request, if you want to ask for that. So there's a little bit of safety in that as well. But maybe that's a segue to invite you all, if you would like to share a little bit about what came up for you as you were answering these questions. What did you discover? Anything surprise you in what you wrote? But if you wanted to be connected to a group of people from a place of your own authenticity, what might you share from what you wrote? And we'll just feel free to come off. You can use the hand, but you don't even need to. You could just, for a small group, you can just come off mute. And yeah, Angela, please.
My heart is racing really fast, Brian.
Excellent.
It was really interesting that as soon as the questions were being read, it was almost as if I had answers quicker than I thought they would come. But I chose to answer the second and the fourth. And for the second of what was safer to have forgotten, my answer was that it was safer to forget that my dad wouldn't show up when I was a little girl, when he would promise for like father and daughter dates. And so he would call and he would say, get ready. And I would say to my mom, like, I need the best dress and my favorite shoes, and like everything has to be the best. And then I would just lay in the couch waiting for him until mom just took me up and took me back to the room. And that showed up multiple times as an adult, with having resistance. It was a lot of resistance. I was like, I don't want to get close to anyone because, yeah, I think it ran very deep as abandonment for me. My watch just said that my heart rate is unusual. For the fourth question, it was what parts of me may have been disowned by choosing not to remember. And for this one, the answer was that I have to be so intentionally after having moved from Venezuela 10 years ago, because at some point after having moved here and learned the language, I felt like I started trying to get Americanized to fit in. And as soon as I saw myself doing that, it was like, go back to your roots. You like eating arepas, and you like dancing. So, no, my God, girls. So, for my little siblings, like whenever I see them trying to fit in, it's like I feel like I'm the arbitro. I don't know how to say that. The player in soccer that like raises the flag. It's like, hey, no, we don't do that. And so it's almost like it is easier to just, fit in and be part of this group than to be the only one that says, do we just want to start dancing Macarena here? So yeah, it's an active choice of remembering our value of community over a sense of individualism. I think that has been the biggest. Here, if you are okay, then and it takes us back to reunion. If one of us is fine, then we don't really care. Like, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. But if we're a community, the food tastes better, the trees smell better, just like everything. It's so much more flavorful. Yeah, those were my answers.
Wow, thank you.
Angela, I told you you belong.
I'm starting to believe it.
Sort of feeling the way in which, on the one hand, if we were in boot camp, that could be the opening to a world of conversation, a world of exploration. Why don't we bring in more shares if folks are willing and begin to sort of populate the room with our voices?
I'll go.
Actually,
And I didn't get through all four. Jalapeno inspired me by saying you only focused on two. Thank you for that. I kind of got on the first two, and particularly the second one, and I don't know why that was, but like Angela, I found myself answering that question amazingly quickly. Like it was a question that had been waiting there for a long time. And the way I responded was, I have found it safer to have forgotten the confrontation and the anger that my household, the household that I grew up in, was heavily populated with. And I'll say this, both of my parents, now passed, were great parents. They did the best they could. And I still find it much safer to forget those angry times, confrontational times. And, my dad, who I loved, passed away a couple years ago in '97. I still find that I resent him, or this is a little left up. Forgive me. I resent him for passing that on to me. And how has that shaped me as a spouse, as a father, as a leader? So that's what my answer then. Craig, that does not sound effed up at all. It sounds quite human and complex in its humanity. You know, I'll offer something. As I said earlier, the reunion process for me was incredibly difficult. And I too had to go into who was my father and why was he the way he was. And I had to, in a sense, it felt like I was inhabiting his experience, his body, even though he passed 30 years ago. And there's this moment, my wife and I live on a farm, a 40-acre farm with a 185-year-old cottonwood tree. And there's this moment, and I wrote a little bit about this in the book, when I was right in the middle of exploring what was it like. In his case, you know, I'll spoil the plot, where I was having been given up for adoption at 18 months old, only to discover on his wedding day that he had been adopted. Because his mother, the woman he knew as his mother, was so angry with him for marrying my mother that she disowned him on the spot by telling him this, by revealing this part of the story. And part of the process is I came to see him no longer as the ghost who haunts me, but as an ancestor. By really trying to step into what was his experience like. And it felt like it was beyond a forgiveness. And there was this moment where I was sitting under the cottonwood tree writing the book, and I swear to all that is holy that I felt him looking over my shoulder, thanking me for just trying to understand. Forget forgiveness. Just understanding. And I offer that to you. It just really just from my heart. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Please.
It was I admired you so much to see your vulnerability. It was almost as if you showed me a part of the masculinity that I have never seen in any of my ancestors. And I could hear you and I was crying with you. And I was like, does this exist? There is. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to say it. Welcome to boot camp. This is boot camp. Yeah.
I'm really, one of the things that I'm reflecting on from hearing both you, Craig, and Angela is, you know, we ask these questions, and the second one, especially what's safer to have forgotten, and we think about like forgetting actually takes work. Like we have to maintain the sense of forgetting, and then we ask these questions, and it turns out that maybe some of those hardest things are just sitting just under the surface. And what's striking me is how quickly you both said, you know, there it is. It's the thing I've been forgetting. It's the thing I've been pushing away. And like, there it is, just under the surface. And a gentle amount of scraping away in the right container and the right question. It's obviously really powerful and really potent, even to name it and to say it out loud. So just wanted to bring that forth.
When I think about reunion, I think of it almost like as like unseparating or like not pushing away something anymore. Then I think the question really invites that awareness or that inquiry. but I really heard in what you were saying a kind of willingness to not reject, the desire to reject the anger in the first, like there was a moment of doing something different and you included and made room for something. And that's in some ways it's the opposite of what was so painful. And so I just wanted to commend the act of courage and like transformation. It's something different that you did right there.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
I'm reminded of a quote from Anipema Chodron. She says, she sees remember as an act of welcoming the unwelcome. And Bell Hooks wrote, we know ourselves through the art and act of remembering. It's that reconnecting, that remembering that which has been dismembered.
Maybe I'll open the space for another voice and someone else would like to include what their experience was. And if one of the ways that you'd like to bring your voice forward in our time here is to share from your writing, that's welcome. And if you also have other, if you have questions about the bootcamp, or if there's ways that we can help you orient to a decision or to just to have a better of a felt sense of what this is a fit for you, I welcome those questions as well too. We'll start to open this space up for more conversation.
I think I saw this somewhere. How many participants?
Well, our aim is going to be 15, but we would open things up to 20 or 25 folks. Beyond 20 or so, the groups starts to feel a little large. We aim for intimate connection, kind of as we've experienced here, Craig. The nice things about the facility, and Margaret, you can confirm that I'm not crazy, that we actually have some flexibility. We're not, unlike other facilities we've been in before, we have to like book the rooms and then we have and what I like about that is that we can create a little bit of extra space for folks who may not be able to afford the full price, or that we can be creative, which is what we're really trying to do. I will tell you that on a personal basis, and I know my co-facilitators share this, we're interested in the cohort.
Yeah.
Like the thing that happened between you, Craig, and Angela is really important for us.
Mm-hmm.
There was something really magical that happened, and I think others benefited. And that's actually, that makes bootcamp not a leadership retreat. Did that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you for bringing in a pragmatic, non-poetic.
And we're entering into, I think, and I'm keeping track properly here, the last few minutes of our time together. So I want to sort of give a last call opportunity if anybody wants to ask a question or share something. Please, Avery.
Hi, everybody. I have a practical question about the boot camp in terms of, this is totally like a self-serving question, but what isn't really? I know it's over a number of days, and I extrovert really hard. I love to extrovert, and then I really need a lot of alone time in between my extrovert sessions. So what are you thinking in terms of programming to make sure that like when I show up, I will show up, and then I need to be able to like go and sleep for 9 hours. So please don't wake me up early.
Yeah. I'll jump in here and my co-facilitators can add whatever. I find that we try to design it to be spacious enough so that we are together in group, and then also having some solo time as well. And so one of the other things that I really appreciated about it when I attended boot camp as a participant, seeing that, like, there were a couple of times where if someone needed something and they needed to go grab a coach and go for a walk, even if the group was doing something together, that was like totally okay. There's we want you to feel really well cared for. And if there's something that you need, then there is space for that, and it's welcome and invited. And so while there is group time, there's also solo time. There's also time on the land, time, contemplative time, rest time. You are not, it's not like getting on a party bus and going to an island and like, you are in this experience from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. It is not that.
Yeah. Avery and I met at the DO lectures, and which is an incredible experience. And it's not DO lectures, where Saturday night they're partying all night, and I had to put my AirPods Max on just so I could go to sleep. I I'm a non-shy introvert, meaning I thrive in a particular group setting, and then the switch gets thrown and I can collapse internally. And so one of the things that I appreciate about how we approach it is that everything is by invitation, and we repeat that.
Mhm.
And so even if we present an exercise and we say, journal, and someone says, you know what, I'd really rather just go for a walk, then we say, vaya con Dios, that is what you need to do. Yeah. So it's really critically important.
I want to share too, in terms of the space. It's part of the beauty of this happening at the MEA campus. It's kind of sprawling. There are nooks and there are courtyards, and then there's all the outdoors spaces to wander into. So there's that flexibility, and like everybody said, it's not just okay. It's absolutely normalized. Like that is being in the flow of the experience. I'm finding myself going back to the poem we read in the beginning. At each current, each wilderness of spirit, a dedicated path. Like each boot camp, or each boot camper is holding that and holding their own dedicated path in that way. Then we're really creating our magic together. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
And I just want to name that it is now 1:45. If totally understandable if anyone needs to jump, but I hand it back to you, Carl.
Yeah. No, I think we're there. I don't see blazing questions, and if you do, please, you've got our emails. You're welcome to reach out, and we'd love to hear from you. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming and spending this a little over an hour with us. You made it what it is, and that's the magic we were hoping to host together. So thank you.